All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the rabbit hole here with Joe Slick, and I have with me Professor Canuck. Professor Canuck is here, and we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the Elsinore quake that happened on Monday. 5.2 happened. Happened right here for, let me see if I can uh, bring that for you all. Share that screen. Did I share that already? I thought I did. Yeah, share that screen right there for you. It was a 5.2 south of Julian, California, 14 kilometers in depth, so probably about 8 or 9 miles. Let me see exactly how deep that is. Because look, we're American. We're not 14.3. What the hell's that? Really? Yeah, 9.125 miles. All right. 42,000 people responded to this. And interesting how that response, um, you know, nearest places, right? How it did it. Let me see if they event sequence potential main shock. All right. And you can see the tensor ball right here. You can see the origins, the interactive map. Here's the interactive map. This is how it's all felt, all the way, in Mexico, out to Havasu, out to me. I'm not actually in Havasu. I'm like right up in here, but it was felt quite a ways, up north of Los Angeles and south of Ensenada, and almost down to San Felipe. So strong quake along a very strong, slow moving fault system. I call it a system because it's a multiple faults in one long system you'll learn about tonight. What else? Go back. We look at the origins, magnitudes, and you'll see 5.2, 5.5, 5.13, 5.6. All right. So they settled down and said, by looking at all four totals, they're calling it a 5.2. Now, if you want more information, what happened right when it happened, you can look up the quick emergency report that we posted on that day, and you can look at it at that. According to the forecast, at least of one aftershock within the next week. Threes are more likely. Fours are only 7% of the chance. Greater than 7 is less than 1%. Greater than 5 is less than 1%. So reality is that we may have some aftershocks. It may be a 4, but more than likely it's a 3. It's like 52% that it'd be a 2 or less. So 48% would be 3 plus. So it's not a big deal. Most people were shocked by it. We talked quite at length about this quake, and you can see, all the people, even Vegas and Bullhead people were calling it in, that they felt it. I was sitting here watching it. I didn't feel it. So I don't know. I was right on. I went live right when it happened, 10 minutes later, actually. So, people's with their shake alert systems all worked. So, but anyway, we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the implications of this quake in a series of other quakes over the last couple hundred years. And what does it mean? Can we gain insight into the past by studying the past to learn about what's going on today? Is there a correlation between the two? Is there something that would let us know about why this earthquake hit right there? And what are those implications? So I have Canuck on the line, and and we're going to go ahead and talk with you a little bit about it. So, Canuck, welcome, and
we're going to do the deep dive on this.
Deep dive. All right. So I have the first article up here for you, and you can.
Yeah. And that one just came out today, so it's pretty good. It's got all sorts of good stuff in it.
Okay.
So this is hot off the presses.
Hot off the press. Yeah, physics.org. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read the title and then we'll go down through it. It's got pretty good info in it. So, little known quake fault has been quiet, but it could unleash devastation across Southern California. So it has a nice picture of the Golden Gate Bridge at the top.
The Bay Area, yeah.
The Bay Area. But I'll explain why, like when we go down through it.
Why that's important, yeah.
Yeah. Below California's famed beaches, mountains, and metropolitan areas lies a sinister web of earthquake faults, some so infamous that their names are burned into our state's collective consciousness. There is, of course, the mighty San Andreas, whose massive slip caused the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and whose notoriety has sparked multiple movies, video games, books, t-shirts, and collectibles. Also well known in LA is the Newport Inglewood Fault, which unleashed the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, the deadliest trembler in Southern California's modern history. The large earthquake fault close to the one that moved Monday morning in the mountains of San Diego County, however, is comparatively obscure. But the Elsinore Fault is part of a larger seismic zone that experts fear and believe more people should know about. The Elsinore Fault Zone is actually one of the largest in Southern California, according to Caltech, but in historical times has been one of the quietest. However, that inactivity belies a devastating potency. The fault is capable of generating a magnitude 7-point earthquake, said seismologist Lucy
7.8. 7.8, yes.
Yeah. From our friend Lucy. She's the one that.
Oh, Lucy, you got some explaining to do.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. The Elsinore Fault is one of the major risks in Southern California, Jones said. The Elsinore Fault Zone runs from the Sonoran Desert in Imperial County through the western edge of Riverside County, communities like Temecula, Murrieta, and Lake Elsinore. By the time it reaches Corona, it splits into two segments, the Chino Fault, which heads towards Chino Hills, and the Whittier Fault, which is near or bisects the LA County suburbs of Whittier,
La Habra Heights, Hacienda Heights, Roland Heights, La Habra, Brea, Yorba Linda, and Orange County.
Yeah. Our particular frightening and plausible prospect would be an earthquake that races up the Elsinore Fault northwest onto the Whittier Fault. That would pour all the energy straight into the LA basin. It's one of the scary earthquakes, Jones said. According to one hypothetical scenario published by the U.S. Geological Survey, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake on the Elsinore Fault Zone, including the Whittier Fault, could bring violent shaking, enough to heavily damage buildings or even jolt them off their foundations, over a relatively large area of the Southland, including El Monte, Hacienda Heights, Roland Heights, Pico Rivera, Whittier, La Habra, Brea, all the ones they just set up above. Placentia, Chino Hills, Corona, Lake Elsinore.
You did pretty good. Murrieta and Temecula.
Yeah.
You did pretty well. All those words aren't your words, but
No.
And I know all those cities.
Yeah. That's a much larger area than the part of the San Fernando Valley that saw violent shaking during the 1994 Northridge earthquake, which was a magnitude 6.7. Severe shaking, enough to topple chimneys and greatly damage poorly built buildings, may be felt a bit farther away from the ruptured fault, including in downtown LA, East LA, Long Beach,
Alhambra.
West Covina, Pomona, Ontario, Riverside, Downey, Norwalk, Santa Ana, Garden Grove, Anaheim, Orange, Irvine, and Lake Forest.
Yeah, Irvine. Yeah.
Yeah, Irvine. Yeah. And very strong shaking could be felt farther out, including the San Fernando Valley, the West Side, South Bay, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the Orange County coast, Rancho Cucamonga, Fontana, and San Bernardino. So basically, this, if it does a 7.8, it's not going to be good. No earthquake in modern times has been this powerful or triggered such substantial damaging shaking across such a wide swath of California.
It's modern times.
Yeah. Southern California's last magnitude 7.9 earthquake occurred in 1857 when the San Andreas ruptured between Monterey and Los Angeles counties. The last equivalent trembler in Northern California was the great 1906 earthquake, which ruptured the San Andreas between Humboldt and Santa Cruz counties and destroyed much of San Francisco. The Elsinore Fault can be thought of as a sibling of the San Andreas, along with the sizable San Jacinto Fault, said Kate Scherer. I think that's how you say it. Yeah. Research geologist with the USGS. The San Jacinto Fault zone starts at the Cajon Pass and moves southeast through San Bernardino and Riverside County before heading into Imperial County. The three faults all move at relatively fast rates on average, meaning each is, generally speaking, more likely to rupture during a span of a human lifetime. The San Andreas and San Jacinto move at an average rate of 20 millimeters a year, while the Elsinore moves at a more modest clip of about 5 millimeters a year. By contrast, the notorious Newport-Inglewood Fault moves far slower, at a rate of 1 millimeter per year.
Well, that answered one question for you.
Yeah, there's some risk that it could be the next one, Sure said, of the risk of a big one on the Elsinore Fault Zone. We focus so much on the San Andreas, but we have this whole suite of active faults that are accumulating strain. Monday's magnitude 5.2 trembler was an uneasy reminder of the fault's power, while the quake, which was centered near Julian, sent shaking across the region. There were no reported injuries or major damage, but that might not be the case next time, especially if a quake strikes closer to major cities. Monday's earthquake resulted in at least 9 aftershocks of magnitude 2.5 or greater, including a magnitude 4 a little more than an hour later. Monday's magnitude 5.2 earthquake was preceded a day earlier by a magnitude 3.3 earthquake, which is now considered a foreshock. The San Jacinto Fault Zone is quite dangerous in its own right, cutting right through the heart of the Inland Empire, underneath many highly populated areas. It's possible the San Jacinto and San Andreas faults could rupture together in a magnitude 7.5 earthquake, which that's what they think happened in 1812. California is at major risk of significant earthquakes because it sits on the edge of a tectonic plate boundary where the Pacific plate, upon which sits San Diego, Los Angeles, and Santa Barbara, is slowly moving northwest relative to the North American plate, upon which sits San Francisco, the Central Valley, and Big Bear Lake. The strain accumulates over decades and centuries and eventually unleashed in the form of an earthquake around that tectonic plate boundary. The Elsinore is a very long fault. The longer the rupture goes in an earthquake, the more total seismic energy is produced. The analogy is like an instrument, a little small kazoo. You can't make it very loud, Scherer said, but if you get to an oboe, you can get a much louder sound because it's such a bigger instrument. So more energy can basically be pumped through that system. Some of California's biggest cities have made strides in requiring seismically vulnerable buildings to be retrofitted, but vulnerabilities remain. A Times investigation published in November found that a number of Southern California suburbs had no active plans to require flimsy apartment buildings known as soft story to be retrofitted against earthquakes. One particular dangerous spot is the Inland Empire, where brick buildings, a hazard that seems so dangerous that LA ordered them fixed or demolished decades ago, are still a threat, despite the fault zones lying underneath the region. Another risk is possibly defective steel frame buildings, which are required to be retrofitted in a few cities like Torrance, Santa Monica, and West Hollywood, but not in Los Angeles. Los Angeles and Orange counties have had little experience with severely damaging earthquakes during the last generation. Since 1998, there's been only one earthquake of magnitude 5 or greater under Los Angeles and Orange counties. That was a 2014 magnitude 5.1 earthquake centered in Brea, which caused more than 2.5 million in damage in that city, Fullerton and La Habra. There was also the magnitude 5.4 Chino Hills earthquake of 2008, centered in San Bernardino County, but just east of Los Angeles and Orange County. It caused little damage.
I remember it.
Yeah. And we've
It was
talked
a
about
hot afternoon when that happened.
Yeah, we talked about those ones before.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. And another thing about the 2014 one there that said the 5.1. Well, I think that was the same year as the Napa quake. So that's interesting. Just not now.
So that it came out of the Times, that article. Rong Gong Lin II, April 16, 2025, on physics.org. The fault, the Elsinore fault, it's broken down into several segments. The northern segment, central segment, and the southern segment. Interesting that we've talked quite extensively about the Glen Ivy segment, the Whittier Narrows fault that happened, the Chino fault system that happened in. Let me see. You can't see that. I have to zoom down here for you. There you go. Well, it's way up here. Whittier Narrows, right there. On screen, we're having problems, but sorry about that. We haven't really talked too much about the central segment, and that's because that's the quietest. However, we do get the Anza Borrego area faulting quite a bit, and then we also see the backlash through bouncing from Anza Borrego over to San Jacinto, which runs up through Hemet and up into San Bernardino up in the north, and El Centro in the south. El Centro is not on the Elsinore fault. It's not on the Laguna Salada, but it is on the Imperial fault zone down here where San Jacinto runs into. And in looking at a larger image, you can see San Andreas, major fault zone. Let me make sure you're able to see that, bud. Right here. There we go. Yeah. San Andreas, San Jacinto, and the Elsinore. The Elsinore breaks down into Mexico, Laguna Salada, way down here. Here's Laguna Salada right here. And that's the southern section. The middle section's right through here. And there's a lot of splays off, between the San Jacinto and the Elsinore fault. And then the northern section, they stop it pretty much in Whittier, or even in Montebello or Alhambra. We talked about this on several of the shows we did in September, beginning with around the 1st, when Malibu started going off, and also in the Palisades here, Pacific Palisades, how it was the landslide was slipping into the ocean, and as it did, as it actually rose out of the ocean because it was bound up on itself. We talked about that. We talked about all these major fault systems through here, and we did hit the Elsinore. We talked about that real brief, but it's a major fault system that periodically goes off. There was a Whittier Narrows fault earthquake. I think that was in like what 90, 98, 99, was it, when that one went on?
Around that time, and there was one back in the 80s too.
I'm sorry, 89. Not 99, 89. I remember that one. I lived in Yorba Linda then. And that shook like crazy. And Yorba Linda would be right up in this region. And I didn't think the Northridge quake was that big. It's different. Where you live is where you live, right? The bowl and of the Santa Susana Mountains and the Malibu Mountains, or Santa Monica Mountains, in the middle is the San Fernando Valley. And that's where the Northridge quake hit. Also in 1971, the San Fernando fault earthquake, that was a big one too. I remember that one as well. But this fault system that works through here, Canuck is going to try to help you familiarize yourself with the three main segments, and we'll talk about these three segments right here. And I'm going to go ahead and read this portion, and then I'll let you jump in if you like. Canuck.
Yeah.
The overview of the Elsinore Fault on the northwest trending Elsinore Fault extends a distance about 190 miles or 306 kilometers from the near Mexican border to the northern end of the Santa Ana Mountains near Los Angeles. The fault zone consists of a series of parallel and interconnected splay faults that extend in the northwest direction across the peninsular ranges of Southern California. There are 7 named sections of the Elsinore Fault zone identified by the working group, the California Earthquake Properties of 1995. Listed here in the north, in the greater Los Angeles area, each section is discussed below. The Chino Fault section and the Whittier Fault section are 2 northern fault strands that merge into the Elsinore Fault near Corona, California. The Glen Ivy Fault section extends about 29 miles between Corona and Lake Elsinore. The Temecula section extends 39 miles from Lake Elsinore southward toward Temecula to Pauma near the northern San Diego County line. The Julian section extends about 49 miles from Pauma near the Palomar Mountain and past Lake Henshaw, Julian, and into the area of Anza Borrego State Park. The Coyote Mountain section starts near Agua Caliente State Park and extends south about 20 miles to the vicinity of Ocotillo, California, near Interstate 8. And the Laguna Fault, Salada Fault, is a southern extension of the Elsinore Fault zone that extends south about 38 miles into northern Baja California. So these are all the sections that it has. And there's a northern section, a central section, and a northern, central, and southern, right? Yeah. We can go into great detail, but I think it's better off if I just put this in chat over there on Twitch if you want to look it up. Great information.
Yeah, it gives super details on where it is and how to follow it. You can actually take a road trip and go along it. And so that website is like super detailed. So you can see how it all connects and where it is. They have pictures. They tell you how to travel along it and everything. It's crazy.
Right, it says here the Whittier Fault and the Chino Fault are both sides of they're a splay that lead into the Elsinore Fault zone. Whittier leans, toward the ocean. Chino leans away toward the desert, so to speak. And we've had several quakes over the past couple of years that have brought us to, thinking that. Let me get out of that. All right, there you go. And then here we are, the Elsinore Trough, Santa Ana tectonic block, Elsinore Fault zone, the Paris tectonic block, the Miocene volcanic rocks. Interesting how on both sides, and then the trough in the middle. Kind of looks like a basin and range kind of pulling apart, right? Or it's just smashing up against each other. But like I said, you can learn more about that if you like. We don't have enough time here to go through each one of these and discuss them, because we do have a few more things we want to talk about. Over in the last couple of days since the fault, the original fault of 3.3, which is right near the epicenter. That was the first earthquake that happened on the 13th. Our 5.2 happened on the 14th. There is 255 quakes in this area. So this 5.2, there's a lot. Largest magnitude, 5.2, it had a 4.0. A 3.3 is where it started. 3.0, afterward 2.9. And we saw these quakes happen as we were watching and talking about them. And like I said, 200 or so fault quakes. Now, as you pan past out, going to 7 days, you'll see up in the Vulcan Mountains, there's another series of earthquakes centered, right? Where is it? Along that same fault system, right? And as you get further and far north, there's less and less and less numbers of faults. However, through the valleys, from one side to the other, you'll see a line of quakes going this way. This is what we call it's a jump over to the other fault. And you'll see it here, and you'll see it here. And these are active, by the way. These splits. And is it related to this? Of course, it's all related, because it's all one big system. The San Jacinto fault, way more active than the Elsinore. But the Elsinore can produce 7.8. Why? Because it's so damn long. I think the San Jacinto, could it do like 7.6? Is that what I heard one time? I'm not quite sure, but I think it's 7.6.
Like the different segments. Yeah. Or multi-segment rupture, I think they said could do.
Right. And the USGS has made movies of what would happen if a earthquake took the path of the San Andreas, right, or the San Jacinto, but they haven't done one that I've found on the Elsinore. It doesn't get as much fanfare. That's basically what it's talking about.
Well, apparently Caltech must have done one, because that's what they were referring to in that article.
Yeah. So Caltech has made one, and we haven't found it yet. Yeah. Maybe we'll find it as we move on to. We're going to leave. Wait, I'm going to back out.
Yeah, so I just want you to leave that.
This article here, we're gonna leave this picture here for you as we talk about further stuff.
I want to explain it.
Sure.
So they didn't even know about the Elsinore Fall until 1910, when there was a 6 up on the Glen Ivy segment just above Lake Elsinore. So that's how it got its name. So that would have been 1910, was 4 years after the big San Fran quake. So that's when they named the Elsinore Fault and got interested in it and started studying it and stuff. But there's been a lot more that's happened just the last few years, because they've been breaking down each segment and putting trenches and trying to figure out when it went before. And so the northern section is basically, they include Whittier and Chino faults in that, and it's basically the north segment, or north part of it, goes down pretty much to Lake Elsinore. Then the central section, the Temecula and Julian together. And then once you get down just below Julian is the southern section that connects through Ocotillo into Laguna Salada. And the Laguna Salada part, they didn't add it to it since, I think it was 2019. They found out that Laguna Salada was connected to the southern part of the Elsinore. And that was all based upon the 2010 Baja quake that was 7.2. So since that time, they've been trying to figure out how this all connects. And apparently it did the same thing back years ago too, because the 1892 quake that we talked about before was also down in the same area as the 2010 one. And so I remembered that when I started looking into this. So I said, well, that's interesting, because the 1892 quake was on the Laguna Salada, and they think it was like same size or maybe slightly bigger than the one we had in 2010 down there. And so that was 1892. Well, the top part of Elsinore shook in 1910. So I said, oh, well, 1892, 1910, that's 18 years difference. So I said, oh, well, that's interesting. So then I started looking, because I knew about 2010, because that was one of the first ones I ever studied. The 2010 Baja 7.2 on Laguna Salada. So I started looking up all the studies for that, because they figured out from doing LIDAR and a bunch of other things, INSAR satellite, that Laguna Salada connects through Ocotillo to the bottom, which is basically where we just had the 5.2, because it was just below Julian there. And so when I started looking into that, I said, well, I'm going to look up 2010 studies on Baja 7.2. And one of the first ones I found was talking about an aftershock that happened to the 2010 one that was on the Coyote Mountie segment around Ocotillo there. And that at first they called it an aftershock, but when they started investigating it, they said, oh, look, this is on the same fault line coming up. And so it had dates on there when all these larger quakes above 5 happened since 2010. So it did an aftershock. Well, they called it an aftershock, but 5.7, I think it was June 2010 near Ocotillo. So like within like 8 weeks of the big quake, 7.2, then the study that I was looking at came out in 2018, 2019. So they were keeping track of all the other times it had like swarms or 5s there. And the next date that it had for a swarm there, and it made a quake up as high as 5.2, was the year 2017. So I said, well, that's interesting. 2017 was when we had the 2 big quakes in Mexico. The one that was 8.1 and the other that was 7 point whatever. The 2 ones that were down there. So then I started looking in that same area again to see when, like, there's been swarms or smaller quakes like that got 3s or 4s. And so when I started looking up it again, it was like 2022 and 2023 when we had all those other Mexico quakes, including the Colima one. Every time it swarmed, like right around Ocotillo, it had quakes there. So I said, well, that's interesting. So I started looking more, and I said, well, now where the 5.2 just happened 2 days ago is just a little bit up from where all these swarms have been since 2010. So I thought that was super interesting. So then I went back in time to 1892. I wanted to see if I could find, because I knew what happened in 1910 and I knew what happened in 1892, and I wanted to look and see if I could find if there was like any evidence of quakes happening down there between 1892 and 1910. And there was. Once I looked up, I found a study that's from, I think it was the early 90s, and it had any felt quake seismic intensity 5 going back to the year 1800. So I could go in and look all that up. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go back and talk about the study that came out in like 2019 that was talking about 2010. So you can see that this appears to be like how it's working recently. So that's the study I want to talk about next.
All righty.
Yeah.
The fracture in advance step observed.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into super detail on this. I'm just going to like read the abstract and
okay,
and like the key points, and then I'll just show you that that's what it appears to be doing based upon the current data they have. So I'm going to read the abstract part. Uninhabited aerial vehicle synthetic aperture radar, UAV-SAR, observations between 2019 to 2017 of the Yuha Desert area and Global Positioning System GPS time series encompassing the region reveal a northward migrating pattern of deformation following the 4th April 2010 magnitude 7.2 Almayor Kukapa EMC earthquake. The north end of the EMC rupture exhibits an asymmetric pattern of deformation that is substantial and smooth northeast of the rupture and limited but with surface fracturing slip northwest. The earthquake triggered 1 centimeter of surface coseismic slip at the Yuha Fault, which continued to slip post-seismically.
Right, so let me interrupt real quick here. It's reference to a 2010 April 4th earthquake of a magnitude 7.2 that occurred in Baja, Mexico. It caused significant damage to the Mexicali Valley and was felt as far away as southern Cal. The earthquake, which happened at a depth of 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles, was located about 25 kilometers or 16 miles south of Guadalupe, Victoria in Mexico. So I just wanted you, and I think it happened on Easter. It was Easter.
Yeah, because they call it like the Easter earthquake, so like same time of year.
Right. 1540 UT, or no, 1540 local time, 2240 UT. I was cooking dinner, and I almost fell over. So I remember. It also had an aftershock of 6.7 in Ocotillo. So pretty amazing. You know, this quake was larger than any other previous earthquake in the region since 1892. And 1892, I think, was
well, we've
north
talked about
of Ridgecrest, right?
No, the 1892 one was in basically the same place as the 2010.
Okay, all right.
Which we talked about before, because that was when all that crazy stuff was happening down there in the early 1890s.
Right. Okay. So as you were speaking up here on reading the abstract, they're talking about how they come to, believe that using synthetic aperture radar or SAR in the desert by looking at that, they they were able to see a northward migrating pattern of deformation following after that earthquake, the 7.2 Maya Kakapa, El Mayor, north of the end of the EMC or Mayor Copa earthquake, right? Exhibits an asymmetric pattern of deformation that's substantial with smooth northeast of the rupture and limited but surface fracturing slip northwest. The earthquake triggered 1 centimeter of surface co-seismic slip at the Yuha fault, which continued to slip post-seismically 2.5 centimeters of the Yuha fault slip. So what they're saying is the earthquake happened and the ground continued to move. Not in earthquakes, but it slid. Most people think, okay, the earthquake's done. It's not moving no more. That's not the case. You have a big earthquake and it will continue to move for months. So, if not years, to move along that section.
And in this one, they're saying it made the 5.7 on June 15th, 2010, going up the fault line
to
near
Ocotillo.
Yeah. And then they talk about that it had another swarm in 2017 as well, in the same area. And so basically this would be all leading in to what we had yesterday. Now, this study is only tracking the stuff from 2008, I think it said.
The published in 2018, this study here. The Ocotillo aftershock, 1.4 millimeter slip on the northwest trend extending to the Elsinore fault, and by 7 years after the earthquake, 2.4 centimeters of slip had accumulated, and the distribution followed after this after-slip function with a 16-day timescale consistent with other earthquakes and a rate of strengthening upper crustal sedimentary layers. GPS data show co-seismic uplift of the Salton Trough and delayed post-seismic motion that may be indicative of fluid migration there and subsidence west of the rupture extension, which continues following the earthquake. The data indicate that the Elsinore, Laguna Salada, and EMC ruptures and part of the same fault system are a part of the same fault system. The results also suggest that north-south shortening and east-west extension across the region drove fracture advancing steps tectonics north of the EMC earthquake rupture. El Mayor Copa, okay, that was or Kukapa, right?
Yeah, and that quake in 2010 happened about 2 months or 2 months, I think it was, after the 8.8 in Chile, which we talked about before. So that was, I think, in February 2010, and then April it had the 7.2.
Yeah. So again, what we do on all of our studies is we kind of say, okay, there's an earthquake happened here. What kind of led up to that earthquake? And what is the post effect of the earthquake? And I think the big thing out of this article is the fact, and for most of us who are just normal average Joes, understanding that after the earthquake, the land still moved, but it's not called an earthquake. It's like bang, okay, things got out the way. The thing holding back the earthquake broke, and now it's free to move. And it moves 3 centimeters or 2 centimeters over a 7 year period. It's like, wow. And does it move? Does it continue to move? No, no. The friction starts to build up again, and then bang, it releases. Maybe 100 years later, I've got a listing of that, the time frame on those. So hold on a second. How often they break in that region? The San Jacinto does it 175 to 200 years. The San Andreas is 200 to 300 years. The section up of the San Andreas up in Wrightwood and Palm Springs, that's 175 to 200 years up there. Also north of Fraser Mountain is 100 to 150 years. So the Borrego Mountain, 1868 was a big quake. 1987, Superstition Hills is a big quake. Along this this area of faulting, significant ground ruptures happened. Along the San Jacinto Fault. Also in the Laguna Salada, 1892 and 2010, significant eruptions of the ground deformation happened. So I like I said, right after it took place, I was telling people, don't be afraid. You know, there's a lot of people that was pushing all this fear. It's like, why? You know, it's counterproductive. You know, you don't help people by posting the fear. The more you can understand how they work, the better you are. You know, understanding the whole idea.
So, based upon all the trench studies they've been doing on Elsinore over the last few years, they think the last time that the central part had a big quake, so like a 7, was 1759. And if you read all the newest stuff, they think it goes off every 250 years.
Right.
So we're in that zone right now with the 7. And like they don't have any records of like the middle of it going off in like the last, since 1759. So, but when I saw that and they had that number, it reminded me that in 1769 was the earthquake that was in the LA area when the Spanish explorers were coming in. So if that number is correct, it went off 10 years before the Spanish explorers were coming into the LA basin and felt the quake that was near what would be LA. So I thought that was interesting. So I said, well, then in that case, it went off before whatever one, either Newport, Inglewood, or whatever one it was along the coast went off. So I thought that was interesting. If that's the actual, that's the date they gave, 1759. And then since then, you've had it, if you want to simplify it, it's quaked both at the top and the bottom, but not in the middle, since 1759.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you just look at
right at the center section, if we're looking at the center section on the map, part from Julian to Lake Elsinore, that center section hasn't really gone off. The Coyote Mountains has, Ocotillo has, and Borrego has, but this section right in through here has not. We also have the Glen Ivy segment has Whittier, Chino. All of those have.
Yeah, so they've had like 5s or 6s, and
Mhm.
recently the 4s the last couple of years. So I just thought that was interesting once I started comparing all the dates and
Right,
stuff.
right.
So then I found that next study, the one that's from the early 90s. You can put that one up, where it talks about the history of all the
Okay.
ones that been felt seismic intensity 5 in San Diego area.
All right. This article here he's got.
Yeah.
Past and possible future earthquakes of significance to the San Diego region by John Anderson and Thomas Rockwell and Duncan Agnew. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one. And then we're going to scroll all the way down through it to where it has the table of all the San Diego quakes that start in 1800.
1803.
Yeah, it starts with 1800, November 22nd.
Intensity felt earthquakes in San Diego. You can see these.
Yeah.
Frequency
So,
has significantly
yeah.
picked up.
Yeah, for it to be on this list that we're looking at, it had to be felt at seismic intensity 5, which is what this 5.2 was, close to it. It was seismic intensity 5. So they actually have dates for these going down through of all the ones that were felt at seismic intensity 5 or above in San Diego. So the first one was 1800, November 22nd, and they say it was seismic intensity 7, but they don't know where it emanated from. Yeah, as they have a question mark for the location. So then in 1803, May 25th, there was another one that was seismic intensity 6. And then 1852 and 1856. 1857 was the big Fort Tejon quake. But see, right before it, September 20th, 1856, there was a seismic intensity 5. So I thought that was interesting when I saw that number. I said, oh, so it was shaken down that way before the big 1857 Fort Tejon 7 point whatever it was, 9 quake. So then I started looking at these other numbers and see 1859, it had another one that they think was seismic intensity 5 or 6 down in that same area. And see, now you're getting into the time period of all those San Francisco quakes we talked about from like 1865. If you remember when we did that. So it appears that San Diego was shaking a few years before the 1865 quake, which was at Santa Cruz Mountains, same place as 1989.
Oh, Santa Cruz, eh?
Yeah, because see, I have all these crazy dates pretty much all. So when I look down through, I say, oh, look. And see, then you get, it looks like it took like a 20-year break or 23 years, and then it's acting up in 1885, which was the same year as the Charleston quake. And well, right the end of the year, 1885 and 1886 was the Charleston quake. So the 1886 Charleston quake on the East Coast was August. So it's pretty interesting that San Diego area was getting a couple felt quakes around that same time. So then I started going down looking at all these other numbers, and then it jumped ahead a bit till 1890, more seismic intensity 5 quakes felt in San Diego. 1891, and then of course 1892 was the big one, the 7 that we just talked about earlier. So San Diego was shaken in 1890 and 1891 before the big one happened in 1892. So I thought that was super interesting too. And then it went down farther, and I noticed 1899, it had a seismic intensity 5 quake. Well, we did all the San Jacinto ones.
Correct.
The first San Jacinto one that we studied was 1899, December 25. So there it is showing up there. So San Diego area was shaken with quakes right before the 1899 San Jacinto one.
Oh, so you got 1925, you got a December 2nd Baja one. What 1933 is the big Long Beach quake. So
yeah,
this area has been known to be,
Yeah, and 1918 was the San Jacinto quake. So see, it was
6.8. Yeah,
it was acting up 15 and 16 before that. It had a quake in that same area the same day as the San Francisco big quake in 1906.
Really?
So that's pretty wild.
April 18th, Imperial Valley had a 6.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
So, yeah. And then we get into...
Which we're what, 2 days away from the anniversary of that quake?
Yeah. And there's a warning
Friday
right now, too, that Holmquist just put out tonight. And he says 6+ for San Fran, most likely Santa Cruz Mountains. That's what he's saying based upon whatever he does. He just had that on here tonight before I started looking up all these other numbers. And so see, it jumps down then on the next page there to 1934. So Long Beach went off in 33, but we know Colima acted up with a whole bunch of crazy quakes in 1932. So see, it's looking all these same time periods. It has it shaken in San Diego. So like I kept going down and I kept looking at all these numbers because this list they have here goes all the way up to like 86, I think, or 88. Because whenever that study came out early 1990s, they had all these ones listed. And so I went down because I know a bunch of the other dates of the quake, like 1971, they have San Diego felt the 71 quake too. I thought it was freaking nuts that it went down that far, that they felt it that far down.
Crazy.
Yeah. And 79 was the other big Imperial quake. Well, of course, they feel that there. And then it went down through and gets into the ones that we talked about before in the 80s. And I thought it was interesting. It was acting up in 85, which is when the big Mexico City quake was. So
in 1985 is actually, it was closer to the shore, but was not inside Mexico City. But Mexico got rocked.
Yeah,
there's no two ways about that.
And then it gets into the ones that we talked about before in 86, and so that's all the other ones, like the ocean side one that was offshore, and I think there's 2 other ones. Wasn't there like the Palm Springs one was around that time too?
Yeah.
All those different ones, like in the Superstition Hills.
Superstition, yeah, in the south there, yeah.
We're all in that same time period, right after the Mexico City quake. And so I thought that only goes to there, but it shows you like San Diego usually shakes before you get a serious one in California somewhere.
Well,
which I find interesting.
this is all one day worth of earthquakes. We get a lot of earthquakes in U.S. of A. A lot of stuff down in SoCal, and on the Elsinore Fault, transferring over to the river to the San Jacinto Fault. So that keeps being transferred. A lot of pressure gets transferred over to the San Andreas. This region right up here is virtually stopping everything.
Yeah. And like when we did the San Jacinto quakes, I think we stopped with I can't remember which one it was. We did all the ones from 1899 up to 54, I think it was. And we stopped and never did like the most recent really larger ones on the San Jacinto. But this is all still the same time period that we just went through in this study, right? So it's crazy.
Correct.
Crazy stuff. So it isn't just San Diego, Elsinore area acting up. It's that whole region from Imperial right on, from the Imperial Falls right on up through. Because you could go and look at each one individually and you can see that that's what it was doing. So it's wild stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, 1 hour. Good. Where's good? Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse to death on this. Is there another portion of this that you wanted to bring up that it really caught your interest? I was going to go into what SAR, synthetic aperture radar is all about, but we can do that at another time. And again, it was just a 5.2. However, fives can do a lot of damage if you're in a mud hut,
But they have already seen that it did move a little bit, so many inches from looking at it just like the last 3 days. Because I can't remember, I read another article or it was one of the reports that I watched where they said that it has moved just from the 5.2. So many inches or
millimeters. Yeah, the ground's moving, and that's the crazy part. It's going to move for a while.
Just when the satellite makes a pass,
right?
How much it's moved. So it's crazy stuff. So I don't know what it's going to do next, but I said based upon what it did between 1892 and 1910, if it's following the same pattern, it's probably not good.
All right, let me see if I can get this. Wait, stop. There we go. See if I can get this little ditty out here
about the bridges. Wow, You'd have to look up each one to find out when it was made.
Easter. Oh, okay. Sorry, Dan. Crazy, huh? I bet you felt it being down in San Diego. I was in Santa Ana, and it felt pretty good to me too. Very strong. The Easter quake, anyway. Let me see. Share screen window. There we go.
Because if Elsinore had a seven in 1759, there wasn't any bridges or buildings there to fall down. Just teepees.
All right. Let me play this video. There we go.
Which that's what I find so funny about when you look up all this stuff and when they figure out when it happened.
Right.
Before, right? So it was totally different there 250 years ago than what it is now. Even though the faults don't care about that. They don't care who is above them or what you built above them. Just the more stuff you build, the more stuff there is to fall down. That's the difference. And land on people.
Don't get none on you. Well, if you're over there on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, and share. You share this video and all. If you're over the Rumble, please do the same. That'll be it for this evening. I want to thank Canuck for your insight and your research. We'll be doing a series probably again of of these faults. We kind of try to pick topics that are advantageous to understanding our world around us and whatever current events going on. So if something happens, we'll be talking about that, but I think on Saturday we may do something interesting. I don't know yet what it is. We generally figure it out the day before or something like that, where something piques the interest, and our people or somebody says something, and it's like, oh yeah, let's check into that. So if you're up for a while and you're on Saturday, you can see us unless something happens. We've had a couple of times here recently that either one of us had issues. It's just part of life, baby. And but anyway, if you're over there on YouTube, hi, and tell us where your name is, what your name is, and where you're from. And over there on Rumble, you can join the chat rooms over here on twitch.tv/Joe Slick Live. We are 24/7 following these earthquakes, and also a little bit of the solar stuff, of course. And we did have a KP8 today. Yeah, yep. Can you believe it? 7.67 actually. And that's a really high geomagnetic storm. Hasn't happened in a long time. But and we talk about the implications of, or thoughts of, why and how that matters. But anyway, you can join us 8 o'clock. I know it said 7, but it's really 8 o'clock Arizona time. If you don't know what that time is, figure it out, because I can't. Anyway, love you all, and thank you, Canuck, for this little update regarding the Elsinore fault and the implications that quite possibly of getting a 7.8 on that fault system. Is a system, right? A zone can get up to that high. That's incredible. And remember, don't get none on you. I'm Joe Slick. I'm out. Have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Love you all. Thanks, Canuck. You're a source, and I love you, brother. Take care.
Yep. Good night, everyone.